Welcome to the Cinephile Hissy Fit podcast, the tirade-filled movie debate podcast hosted by two film critics, two cool dads, and two struggling teachers. I'm Don Shanahan.
And I was going to say some kind of clever Blade Runner-ish name, but I couldn't think of one, so I'm William Johnson.
That'll work. We're damn glad to have you folks listening to this thing. This is all for tantrum's sake, where shared passions and high fives wash away any place for hate. In the end, we encourage you all to love what you love, but for now, the gloves are off and the Hissy Fit is on. This week, the booth gets a little bigger. Folks, we have our first official guest. We like to call them the tiebreaker. Today, we're going to talk about Blade Runner 1982, recommended kind of by the whole dais that's here today. Our format is this. The recommending lover is going to go first, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be Will to start this off. They will get 5 uninterrupted minutes to shower their praise and state their high-minded case. The hater, which is not really me, but I'll still be second just because Will needs to get things off his chest. The hater follows with 5 uninterrupted minutes of their own to present their counterpoints with any number of intellectual scorched earth, or any manner of it, I should say. After that, our guest today will get their 5 minutes to kind of put us both down. After that, we will open it up to an open shared discussion where the Hissy Fit hopefully gets really chippy. We hope you've got your judge's scorecard. We brought in a tiebreaker. We brought in some heavy muscle here to kind of settle some of these debates. So, folks, let's go. Will, would you like to introduce our wonderful guest today?
I certainly will. He is a man of many talents, a writer, a singer, a great massage artist.
Oh my gosh, I never knew all this about him.
Yeah, that is true. But he is from Phoenix, Arizona, via some cold little hamlet in Wisconsin somewhere. His name is Ben Cahlamer. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. I put on my replicant outfit for this podcast. I can't tell you how great it is to be amongst you. As Will implied, yes, I am from a cold little hamlet in Wisconsin called Milwaukee. I moved to the furnace that is Phoenix. As a matter of fact, it's 110 degrees outside. I'm a film critic. I used to write for the Phoenix Film Festival, and I actually serve as the LGBTQ film programmer for that festival. I also have my own website, The Movie Review, REVUE. Yes, it's catchy. And I've been writing film reviews since about 2015. And, my history in film is not as long as the arms of some of the other people we associate with in filmdom, film Twitter, as it's called. I guess I'm not as picky as others, although I've become a lot more picky in the last year because of COVID and not having enough movies to watch. But I really like the independent films, and Blade Runner is definitely right up my alley.
Now, William, you're kind of the guy who brought Ben in here as the fellow Phoenixian or whatever, Phoenician, whatever we're supposed to call you clowns down in there in the furnace.
Sure.
How'd you two meet?
I was trying to get into the film press circuit thingamajig, and actually, Don, you got me Ben's info.
That's true.
He ended up inviting me to a couple screenings where we talked about, in between the screenings and before the showings, we would talk about Star Trek: The Next Generation for endless amounts of time, to the annoyance of probably everyone around us, but that's fine. No, we met up. I remember we went to see, I think it was Downton Abbey was our first screening together, and then you took me to Joker, and then we just started becoming film buds at that point. Then the pandemic hit, and I haven't really seen Ben since, unfortunately. So it's been kind of lonely out there in the film screening land. But yeah, Ben is probably one of the most knowledgeable guys, and he'll call you on your bullshit too. Like,
you don't say. This guy sounds perfect for the show, but it also sounds like this is all my fault for introducing you two together. Oh, great.
Absolutely. Okay. No. Yeah, no. I've gone on some rants about some of the stupid shit that I talk about, and Ben will sit there and go, "Really?" And then he'll give me a 45-minute lecture on how wrong I am, which I appreciate because that helps.
Ben, are you free to do a podcast with a fellow film critic from Chicago? Because I got some space here for a co-host. That this sounds great. Call on bullshit. Okay, I like it.
Ben is
Now,
very smart guy, very smart.
Now, Ben, remind me, how did we intersect? Like, because through the grapevine of film critics and film Twitter and Facebook and things like that, I'm trying to figure out like how we ran into each other, like which mutual friend or which mutual show we found each other on.
I seem to remember. Sorry if this sounds blunt, but
Yeah.
like every one of the other friends that I've made via Facebook, I think it was just random interaction on one of the groups, the mutual groups that we're a part of, and
Right.
the conversations that you and I have had both in public and in private have been very spirited, and you and I seem to land quite a bit on the same page with respect to
True.
movies and things of that nature.
You hear that, Will? Same page, man.
I'm
Same
not
page.
listening. I don't care.
Yeah, I know. All right, gentlemen.
I land on Will's page a lot too.
That's true. Well, every branch dressing needs to spill on some counter, so that's fine. That's not bad.
Absolutely.
All right, so fellas, we are here for 2 episodes. We're going to split this up into 2 here, folks. So you'll hear all this intro and cute stuff again in an hour, well, in a week, but you know how that's going to go. Today, we're talking about Ridley Scott's 1982 watershed, Blade Runner. The plan here is to talk about Blade Runner first and Blade Runner 2049 second. So, folks, we call that a teaser in the business to keep you here for not just this week, but for next week. So, Will, are you the man that's going to go first on this one?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I can
All
do
right.
that.
5 minutes and the dinger will ding. Let's see if you've done anything to, keep a timer on your side so you know what you're doing.
Nope, I didn't, but that's okay. Anyways.
Fire away.
All right, so Blade Runner 1982, as you called it, but it would technically be called Blade Runner 2019.
This is true.
If we were being very specific, is one of my all-time favorite films. I actually have Blade Runner 1 and 2, as I'll call it, in my top 10 all time. And recently, Blade Runner 2049 entered my number 1 spot for the first time in about, I'd say about 10, 15 years. Heat was kind of the winner up there for a long time. But we'll get into Blade Runner 2049 later. But Blade Runner, the first one, directed by Ridley Scott, there's a lot of things you got to put into context here. Science fiction was in its rebirth. Star Wars was dominating the cinematic landscape at that point. Return of the Jedi was about to come out the next year, I believe, if my chronology is correct.
You are correct.
And you've got you've had all the Star Wars derivatives that came out as well, and as often the case with something that changes the cultural zeitgeist, there's 2 kinds of filmmakers. There's the ones who try to mimic and those who try to change it. The reason why Blade Runner, I think, is such a big success, and it wasn't, and the fact that it was not you say it's a watershed moment, but I don't think it initially would be considered that, because it was actually, I don't think it was really considered the classic it really was until the director's cut came out 10 years later.
I think you're right.
That's my opinion. I don't know. But because the film was technically a box office, not disaster, but not a success. And the reason for that is because, unlike derivatives of Star Wars, which was, to be honest, Star Wars is an archetypal hero's journey type of story. And that's very easy to replicate. This was a film that tried to dig into philosophy. This is a film that tries to dig into the essence of your being, the essence of your soul, which happens to be one of my favorite things to examine. Whether it be Star Trek, which does it probably on a more fable-esque level, or Blade Runner itself, which takes it to the extreme. Now, the cool thing about it was this film looked just as good as the Star Wars of the world. So what you had is, and this probably helped the marketing department, was you had this what appeared to be this epic sci-fi scope, right? And the opening shot of the film showing the the fire stacks over this endless vista of depressing looking LA in 2019 um, gives you that scope on a visual level. So the film appeals to you on a visual level, but what it does is it takes you down to the smallest moments of just even memories and in moments in the rain, if you will. Memories in rain, or whatever we're going to quote it. I probably didn't quote it correctly, but who cares? The point is that the film is about the small moments of humanity or that quest for humanity. And to me, I don't think that's a story audiences were ready to tackle. There's a reason why this film has grown over time because it's deep. It's deep. It's a deep film. And that's what attracts me the most. Is there some technical things here? Is there some willful ability to mess with time a little bit and perhaps um, go on a little too long in some places? I don't mind that kind of thing. I'm a David Lynch fan, so I'm used to that kind of thing. But yes, you could find flaws in it. You could go in with expectations thinking, oh, I can't wait to see this epic sci-fi yarn. And then you're getting philosophical discussions via the Voight-Kampff test and what the existence of life is for 125 minutes instead. So I think it all comes down to what your expectations are, what you sit to get out of it, and how it makes you feel in the end. Blade Runner is a film that I not only think about every day, but I also find something new in every viewing. And to me, that is the mark of a true cinematic masterpiece, in my opinion, of storytelling. So I'm going to end 30 seconds early because I don't have a timer. And thankfully, Don sent me a little thing that said 30 seconds. So I'm going to take as long as possible until the bell rings. Good enough.
Well
Yay!
done. Well done, Mr. Johnson. Look at you. Ben, did you slip him that little succinct dictionary definition? Because
No,
that's
I
tiny.
didn't.
All right. I guess I got 5 minutes to go here next. All right. So no, for me, I admit this movie did not start well for me in my filmdom, my career, or whatever you want to call it, like that. I watched this movie for the first time on a fucking football bus on a like a 13-inch on a 13-inch like charter bus screen on a football road trip to Tennessee. And like the assistant coach, this is my freshman year of high school, so or freshman year of college, so it'd be like 1997, 1998. And it was he's like, dude, this movie fucking rocks. You know, he was the offensive line coach. He was like a grad assistant, so he was like 22 years old. And on a football bus of dudes who are, taking a 14-hour road trip for a football game on a Friday afternoon. Blade Runner probably isn't the bus movie you're really going for. The sound is shitty. The picture is small as can be. I'm 4 seats away. All I can see is the damn rain and flickering lights here and there. So I did not have a good experience. It was obviously like a VHS tape director's cut, or like likely previous cut of it from back in the day with the Harrison Ford voiceover and all that. It did not get a good first impression for me. But I'm with you, Will. Every time I watch this movie, I get something else and I get something more, whether it's something to be impressed at from a filmmaking standpoint, something to be impressed by from a stylistic standpoint, or like you're saying, a philosophical or bigger picture standpoint. The complexity of this movie is really, really outstanding. I'm not surprised its headiness was too big for its time and too big for its critics. And I'm not surprised that headiness isn't the kind of, it has been the cream that rises to the top, because this movie, yeah, I tell you what, I mean, if Ridley Scott didn't have Gladiator and a few other things that you can kind of go, well, that's pretty good right there. Because I'm one of those, we've talked about this a little bit, and Ben knows where I'm at with other film groups where I get, I'm the masterpiece cop. But if a director gets one masterpiece, man, I think I'm putting this one above a few other things. I love Black Hawk Down. I love Gladiator, and Alien does things that other movies couldn't try to do. But this movie is something special, and it's really impressive in that way. What I love about it more than anything, as a guy who, since coming back to the movie after the fucking football bus, is I love the noir take on it. The rainy noir, the futuristic noir. I love the compelling character that Harrison Ford creates, and really interesting, different shades of gray villains. Whether it's Terrell from the executive suite kind of level stuff, or just Rutger Hauer and Daryl Hannah and the different replicants that we're chasing. I just really enjoy the different styles of characters they put in this movie and how they mashed them together with all these floating around philosophies. And that's one thing, and we're going to talk about this in a different time in an hour from now, but that's something I feel like the sequel fails, that you just don't have that kind of compelling characters, because this is a movie. It's tight, it's 2 hours, it's thrilling, it's fascinating to watch and look at, where the movie looks great, but it backs it up with excellent story arcs and something going on there. Is it can it be boring? Yes, I think it can be. Like, I admit, the second time I saw it, I was bored. And it took me getting back into it more and more to be like, you know what? The more I pick up and the more I notice, there's a lot more going on than just the boredom here that I need to pay attention to. And last night I watched it. I watched the final cut for the first time. And man, one, it looks great on a big television for a change, because it beats the football bus. And whatever they've done to restore it since then in its 1080p quality, I don't know if it's made it to 4K yet, but it looks like $1 zillion. And the more and more that they've tinkered with this movie, I'm really happy with how it turned out, because I think the director's cut is where my first experience came from it, or likely even just the shitty VHS version. But what they've got now is very taut, clean as a whistle in terms of aesthetics, and I cannot help but be impressed every step I watch it. Is it something that I put a big pedestal for, like as an all timer that I always come back to as a personal favorite? No, I don't. I'm not saying this is a forgettable movie in any kind of way, but it's not a favorite for me. It's not something I'm going to pull off the shelf. It's something I immensely respect and really point to. And I called it a watershed, and I think it has stood that test of time to be so. I wish it pinged more for me as like a personal favorite, but with time, it can keep growing and doing that. And just like you, I've got 10 seconds left to drag and belabor the last little point before the bell.
So that was the hater version.
Yeah, I mean, I admit, I came to it. I came to this movie from a place of hate. I found it boring for a long time. Last night's rewatch really kicked it up a notch for me, where it's saving itself every time I watch it, and I'm very okay with that. But I will call it an all timer in terms of sci-fi and things like that. I'll never pull it off the shelf and go, "Hey guys, you know what movie I really love? It's fucking Blade Runner." It's a little too ostentatious for me to pull it off. Yeah, I'm gonna watch Independence Day before I'm gonna watch Blade Runner every single time. I'll be the Marvel shill of the room. Give me the shiny, awesome toy more than the rainy, smeared, violent thing.
Well, I take that as a threat, because I have to either defend that, or I have to either defend that take or fight against it, and I'm not sure how to react to that. So thank you for confusing me. My replicant brain is short circuited. So
You're welcome. That's a show first right there. 16 episodes, and Ben, the final 5 minutes. Whether it's tiebreaker, whether it's pile on, I don't know if there's much tiebreaking we need. Celebrate your 5 minutes right here, right now.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm going to take a step back in history. The first time that I saw even an inch of Blade Runner was on a VHS cassette on probably a 27-inch TV at the time, somewhere around 1983, 1984. And I only saw a few minutes of the movie, but even as a 5-year-old kid, 6-year-old kid, yes, I was watching R-rated movies when I was that young, apparently.
attaboy.
um, something drew me into the movie. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I was just impressed. And I only got to watch a small snippet of it. Flash forward to 1994, 1995, when I was at college, and the campus carried a movie channel where they screened on a schedule a series of films, and Blade Runner happened to be one of them, and it was the original theatrical cut. And I sat there and I watched it, and like you, Don, there were moments at that age where it bored me.
Hmm.
It was a little too long in the tooth in some areas. A lot of exposition without a lot of explanation. I walked away from watching that not feeling very sure about myself in relation to the movie, but I think that's part of its intent. The other part, though, is that my dad came up to visit me one year. I think I turned 21. It was parents' weekend. We went to the bar for the first time, and I ordered Sex on the Beach because I was asked what kind of a drink I wanted, and I didn't know. So that was the first thing that popped into my head. And then he took me shopping for movies for my birthday, and I happened to have picked out then the director's cut of the version in which was out in 1992. And he and I started watching it, and I could tell that it was not his cup of tea. But by the time we started watching it, and I got through it, it was something that I just fell in love with because the characters are so rich, the environment is so rich, the tactile and technical details that the film evokes are so strong. Um, it's not something that you can entirely relate to because it's in the future, but the atmosphere that the film creates and the environment that it creates is not something so far fetched with the way we humans are treating our Mother Earth, and um, it was very um forward thinking in terms of how big corporations were going to supersede government. I mean, if you really think about it, there's no government influence in the movie. It's all big corporations. Yes, there are laws, there are rules that if the replicants violate them, they'll be terminated. That's the whole point of the movie. But the other thing to fast backward into 1982 when the movie came out, people didn't want to think about a dystopian future, right? They were too busy living in the moment of the gas shortage problems and the hyperinflation that was happening. They were feeling exactly what the movie was depicting, and it wasn't a very comfortable feeling. And so I think that's one of the reasons. Also, because it was a heady sci-fi film, they didn't want to stare into the looking glass, so to speak, and see what it was that they were living at that moment. And it's I've watched the movie multiple times over the years. We have to remember that there was a theatrical cut that Ridley Scott did not have control over. The producers went in and assumed creative control. I think it might have been contractual, but they were the ones who forced the rather monotonous voiceover
Hmm.
that Harrison Ford does. You could tell Harrison Ford just wasn't into doing that voiceover. But as
Mm.
striking as the visuals were, it was. It's just an awe-inspiring movie. It makes you think, and I think my time might be up. And if not, we'll just sit here and think about Vangelis's amazing score for that film.
Not bad. You hit the mark pretty good.
Yeah,
All right.
it's Harrison Ford definitely did not like it. If you are a nerd like me and watch the 4 hour making of Blade Runner documentary that came with the final cut
Damn.
on the 5 disc DVD, they
Damn.
actually have recording sessions from the voiceover in
Hmm.
which you can hear Harrison Ford deliver the line like a great actor that he is, and then you can hear like something fall down as if he threw something and said, "Guys, this is fucking weird." Like he really hated the
Hmm.
voiceover. So
I mean, I get why too. I mean, it's just. I remember watching the cut with the voiceover, and it's. I know that's kind of the film noir thing where you feel like you're watching a Humphrey Bogart thing, but it doesn't play in this dystopian thing. It would play in a different place, but nah, man. It's yeah. I'm glad they Glad that's since been cut.
Yeah, definitely.
So
It's not great.
So bouncing around the room here, we've got three lovers and a couple of people who were late bloomers into this movie. So it's a fun place to be.
No, I count this as a victory for me because
Of course you do.
last night Don posted on his Facebook that he was
Yeah,
watching it for podcast homework,
I
and
did.
he was being a little shit like he usually is, and
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
basically telling him. He's like, I'll see if I can stay awake. Harf, harf, harf.
Oh
And what
yeah,
do you know? You come on this episode expecting to be the hater, and you're a lover now. So you know
yeah,
what?
yeah. No.
I win.
Yeah, the movie one. You didn't do shit. But in the meantime, no. I tell you what. The credit to this is and we're in a year with Zack Snyder getting his tinkering way of Justice League, and we're in a reality where things get tinkered with by studios, things get retinkered and restored by directors. We've seen directors cuts show up here and there in the DVD realm of things over the last 20 years, and those things can be hit and miss. But this is one where, man, I'm glad they've taken the time to restore this, clean it up, and then also Ridley Scott to kind of hone and shape the vision that this movie could be. And it makes me wonder. And I know it's a slippery slope and a dangerous thing when you do this, because I think and Zack Snyder is that guy who's unfortunately is the example at the moment where you when you give when you take away artistic freedom, it sucks because maybe something good is supposed to come out as something from the people who have the heart and the stock in it versus the studios who are just trying to make a buck. But then at the same time, I do feel like when there's a collaborative approach in the right kind of way between studio filmmakers, all the different technicians and artists that are in a film, that there is some reining in that is possible and sometimes necessary for different films. And as much as I'll call Justice League, for example, an improvement from the shit that it was with Joss Whedon and chopping it up in the circumstances of which, of course, are horrible, for what Zach had to do to depart that film. But when I watch the 4 hour cut and go, dude, all right, okay, I get it. You got the money to fill in and do what you want to do, but hey, man, just dial it back a little bit, trim the fat. And that's the fun part about this for Ridley is this is sharpening a knife, and I love it because it's become this is a great example of where tinkering doesn't have to be severe, but it can be with a scalpel instead of a machete, or with small little Botox injections instead of liposuction, and you can get a lot out of it.
What
Yeah, but go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
What's interesting about Blade Runner's history is that the audience discovered it because of the underground screenings of the work print version, which is a part of that 5 disc set that Will mentioned. And it was because people fell in the work print version omits the voiceover, it restores the unicorn scene. There are a number of other additions, but people fell in love with that version when they could see it. And that was the whole reason why Warner Brothers gave Ridley Scott the opportunity to do his director's cut in 1992. And, I might be misremembering a couple of things, but the important thing to remember is that this was an independently produced film. I don't know if it falls under the same auspices as Superman with the Salkinds,
Mhm.
where they put the money up and Warner Brothers just released the film.
Right, right. Yeah,
Blade Runner uh, um, suffered theatrically under the same set of circumstances, and it was only because of the audience that it has a second life. And audiences have had an opportunity to cherish each version. When I did a double feature, I took the risk and I did a double feature earlier this week of both films, and I know we're not talking about Blade Runner 2049, but I hadn't seen it since theater in 2017, even though I've had it on 4K disc since it came out in 2018. But I watched the final cut just like you did. It is on 4K. It looks and sounds amazing. It's not the first
Hmm.
time that I've seen it, but the common comment that I've gotten off my Facebook post was that the uh, work print version, I think, is the fans' most preferred version of the film, and it's rough
Interesting.
on disc, but we have it and it's out there. I think don't hold a gun to my head to this, but I think the work print version remains my favorite
Okay.
because it's the most complete version that Ridley Scott had intended.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think this is. I think I've maybe seen the voiceover cut or whatever we want to call that theatrical cut only once. I've seen the director's cut a trillion times and the final cut a few times as well. I bought the DVD box set that came out with it, which came in a briefcase
Yes.
and
Mhm.
came with like a spinner doll and all kinds of stuff. So I definitely bought that. But the the whether the one of the things we need to talk about with the Blade Runner, like you said, with the director's cut, the final cut, the work print cut, they're all out there for anyone to discover and appreciate. Now that's the thing that has has been tough for me with the Star Wars re-releases is
Mhm.
because if you prefer the originals that don't have weird dancing baboons in them and all kinds of crazy stuff, you you don't get the option to watch the originals.
That's
So
true.
the great thing about Blade Runner is you can any version you like, it's out there. You can watch it, and that's fantastic.
Mhm.
That's what I think is one of the great things about Blade Runner is it's always going to keep the story of Blade Runner alive from a filmmaking perspective because you're always going to have I like the work cut because of this, and I like the theatrical because of this, and I like the director's cut because of that, and you'll kind of always have something to talk about. And I love that idea that I can meet people. I mean, Ben is probably the first person I've met. I just confirmed it that likes the work print cut the best. I've never met anybody that does. Usually, they're theatrical or directors is kind of the main
Yeah, yeah. I run into that
battle.
too.
Yeah, but that's awesome because now we have different perspectives on a story, that we can see and appreciate, without it being forced down our throats. You know,
I might lose your audience at this moment, but I don't mind the special editions of Star Wars. What
Me
I
too.
do,
Same here.
what I
Love 'em.
okay, good, thank you. What I do mind though is that the tweaking and the tinkering that uh, Lucas started with the special editions, and then Disney has done since they released it digitally and then on disc.
Mhm.
There is not a consistent version of Star Wars, save for the theatrical cuts, since 1997. And what I admire about the special editions is that the um, it was a test bed for the CGI work that was going to be done in the prequel films. And I happen to have caught Phantom Menace the other day, and I get why people don't like it, but it's I think Lucas is a much more gifted storyteller than people generally give him credit for,
I agree.
and I think it's fandom who uh, ruined my appetite for Star Wars, but made my appreciation for Blade Runner grow that much more. Fandom has a funny way of doing things to films.
Mhm. I
oh
agree
no,
with you
I'm the
there.
same way. I'm not a Star Wars person anymore. I used to be, but yeah, the fandom does change that stuff a lot. And you know what? I thought we were all getting along on this podcast, and then you both have to defend the special editions. Fine, you're wrong. That's okay. It's okay to be wrong. But anyways, your point is made. Is that yes? I think that the Blade Runner fandom is pretty. I would say a little bit more um, um,
Realistic.
cerebral,
That's a good way of
realistic,
putting it. Two good
but
words there.
yeah. But you know, there's also that fact that you have all the versions available, so no one has to cry in their milk that
Yeah,
they don't get to see the one that they like. They get to
yeah.
see them all, so that's
Fair
great.
point. Fair point.
They're going to push their favorite version though, and I
Sure.
think I think I think where I draw the line in that is that each version of the film is so unique and different that there's something to appreciate
Hmm.
and something to abhor in all of them, that
Mhm.
you can have this type of discussion. But man, I love this film.
Hmm.
Yep. It was a couple of facts about the film.
Oh, here
It
we
looks
go.
like in 1993 it was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry because it was considered, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
No
So
argument there.
that's a big one there. Just curious, has anyone read the book?
No, I have not. I've done some Philip K. Dick reading on audiobook and things like that, but I haven't made it to this one.
I've got the book in my library or collection somewhere. I have not read it yet.
I have read it, and
Whoa, 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 whoa!
it's
You read?
okay. I'm an English teacher. I read for a living,
Oh,
basically.
okay,
Don't
okay.
start with this reading crap.
I keep forgetting
Um,
we do that. Okay, okay.
yes, no. The the book is. I would say that the film. It's very similar to what happened with The Shining, with Stephen King. It's more. The book is more of a. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of giving its essence to the movie, but the movie is its own thing.
Hmm.
The book is very different from what the
I'm not
film ended up
surprised
being,
there. Yeah.
A
and that's okay.
Sorry, a very similar thing happened when they adapted Philip K. Dick's book for Total Recall.
Very
Yes,
different.
true.
Yeah, that book I've read. And that it's completely different than the movies. Even the
Yeah,
film.
absolutely, absolutely. It's a good book. I recommend reading it if you haven't read it. It's very good. But if you're reading it expecting to get Blade Runner, you will be grossly disappointed. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I was also
No.
going to say, Don. I was also going to say that
Mhm.
there was a comic version of
All right.
Blade Runner that came out.
I do like colorful pictures. That's my
It
speed for
it
me.
was it, it was a Marvel release. They released a
You would know.
45 45 page adaptation of it,
Okay.
and it was had art by Jim Steranko and was written by Marvel and DC legend Archie Goodwin. So
That's a
it's
nice pairing.
actually it's actually one of the hardest trade paperbacks to find in Marvel history.
The library will win that one. Sounds good. No, from a filmmaking standpoint, and I know this will be a point of debate in the next show when we get to the art and aesthetics of 2049. But no, I for its time, especially coming out of things like Star Wars, and even the same year as Tron, the neo futuristic production design done by Lawrence G. Paul is
Hmm.
outstanding. It's chef kiss good, and the fun part is you sometimes, and this happens plenty in different movies, especially in the science fiction genre, that shiny and glossy looks great from time to time, but if you can put futuristic into dinge, that's a heightened and different challenge. And man, did he nail this! Rightfully nominated for the Academy Award that year. I don't know what it lost to. I'm going to look that up here in a second because I'm curious enough that of the 82 or the 83 Oscars here. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, Ridley had said that he really loved the used future of
Hmm.
um, Star Wars, and he very clearly used that in Alien. And then obviously he continued that here. And we'll talk about that in Blade Runner
Yeah.
2049, but there's actually something that they did with the continuation of the technology in the sequel that is
Mhm.
brilliant in itself. But we'll talk
Oh,
about that later.
sure. By the way, Oscar-wise, it lost art direction and production design to Gandhi. So fuck
Oh.
off, Gandhi.
That's
Yeah.
I
Fuck you, Gandhi.
Come on, man. Didn't you win
oh
enough Oscars that year, Gandhi? Because it did. Get out of here, Gandhi.
Gandhi is sitting on a pile of my epics that I want to watch that I've never seen.
Mm.
So you've already soured my taste for the movie going into it because it won against Blade Runner. I mean,
Mhm.
geez.
Yeah, I mean, 82, hell of a year for sci-fi because you have Tron, you have E.T., you have The Thing, you got Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan. Amazing year. When people do the whole 1939, 1999, some of those years of great cinema, I pull up 82 because you still have all that sci-fi. You know, Gandhi ain't bad. You still have an epic like Reds that Warren Beatty did. Tootsie stands on its own in a lot of different levels. Sophie's Choice is amazing. And then you got the box office stuff of like Poltergeist and you have Rocky 3, Porky's. You know, there's
Conan.
48 Hours, you know, Annie, you have a great year in 82, and Blade Runner
Yes.
is a piece of that. So,
Yep.
Absolutely.
so I mean, fellas, where else do you kind of want to talk here? Because I mean, we're coming up on a nice little tiny time of episode.
The thing about Blade Runner is you could make a whole podcast series out of talking about Blade Runner. You could break it
True.
down. So I feel like we didn't give it enough
Well, here
information,
I'll
but
segue.
it's good.
I'll segue it into a big question here. So, and I'm going to point this to my co-host Will here. Will, you put this way up there in a list because of its philosophy and because of the human nature part of it. And I admit, in doing the Wikipedia history of doing some research on it last night, a lot of the critics of its time, the Roger Eberts and the Richard Shekels and the folks of that era, they felt like the human story is thin. How would you debate them in return on something like that?
Um, I actually, and I want to hear Ben's take on this as well. I disagree wholeheartedly because um, the characters themselves, because it's human on a deeper level.
Hmm.
It's about the essence of being human itself, and I think that the when you have a character like Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, who is the debate is out there whether he's a replicant or not.
Hmm.
In this film anyway. Then you have Rachel, who's got implanted memories and has feelings and can live. I believe, if I remember correctly, her replicant can live forever. Is that correct? Or live a
Something like that.
lifetime?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then you have the replicants who know they're not human but desire to be human, but have feelings, can feel pain, they feel loss, they have memories that, like they said, will be lost in the rain. To me, that's the most powerful human story you can have.
Mhm.
I understand maybe on a dramatic level, you're not feeling the Deckard and Rachel love. Maybe that's not too strong.
Right, right. I
Maybe,
think that's
maybe,
a knock. I've heard that knock before as well.
yeah,
Had
maybe Deckard.
had it
Deckard
myself
is
too.
maybe Deckard isn't the most three-dimensional character or the most emotional character,
Hmm.
but what you have is you have that dialogue of humanity, and I think that makes up for any typical archetypal types of relationships, because what is more human than they even say it in the movie, more human than human. What is
Hmm.
more human than the idea, like, if a memory is not yours but it's still yours and you relate to it, how far away does that make you human? You know what I mean? It's hard to put into like a simple statement, but I think it's one of the most human stories of all.
Ben, where do you go with that?
I think the finality of life and the limited span of the next six replicants is probably its most quintessential element.
Hmm.
Because you are, even though you have these memories, even though you can relate to them, your life will cease. And I think one of the things that I reflect on the most about the film is that it feels very rote, and not necessarily in a bad way. It's very mechanical. And
Hmm.
that is in keeping with the spirit of the characters and how they interact with each other and how they interact with the humans. If you think about uh, Eldon Tyrell, and you think about Gaff, and you think about uh, Oh, I'm trying to think of um, William Sanderson's character.
Hmm.
Sebastian.
Sebastian.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
Sebastian. Sebastian is fallible. He's a human who um, can't go off world because he has a medical condition, right? Um, Eldon Tyrell is old. Um, he's very comfortable in his surroundings. Neither one reflects on a fast or an accelerated life. The other one relishes in life, but creates life, a mechanical life, and puts a an end date, if you will, end of life date, and can't alter it and can't change it. But he's done that with Rachel. Rachel will outlive all of us, theoretically.
Right, right.
Hmm.
And so I think when your characters are forced to think about the finality of their lives and the memories that they were implanted with, there's not necessarily an equation in my mind that the two intersect. And yet the movie aims and hits the target, the bullseye, to bring the two together. And I think, um, along with Will's comments, that's really what makes the film more human than human.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave myself with a little tidbit here. Do either of you know where the name of the film came from?
No, sir.
Uh, it's based on a William S. Burroughs name of a uh, Um, it actually came from William S. Burroughs in the mid to late 70s, based on another treatment that had a very similar tone and landscape uh, to the movie that we got.
Hmm. No, I tell you what, like to hearing both of you guys talk philosophy and go deep with it. I admit that, like I said, the movie's growing on me. It gets better with time. And on my rewatch last night, the character that really stood out to me, and it's a factor we'll talk about in the next show that I feel like is lacking in the sequel, is Rutger Hauer's character. It's
Y-
just fantastic, and you put that actor in that position, you give him those monologues, but you deliver him with that character with, like you said, that ticking clock of mortality, yet artificial mortality.
Yep.
And you put that up against, a bite scratching claw Harrison Ford, who's just trying to get through this and figure out his own thing. And but you have this, the frantic speed of which in that big confrontation, the frantic speed in which Harrison's trying to just, like I said, bite, scratch, and claw to stay alive, and yet you have a guy with a ticking clock who isn't, and is savoring even the worst of his time.
Yep.
And I dug that, like that, those thematic pieces really came into play and helped out a ton this time around for me. And yeah, just I could see this movie continuing to climb the charts for me with time. Will it ever be a stone cold amazing favorite? No, probably not, but it'll be something I quickly reference and respect and enjoy where I can. So that's
I
not
I,
bad.
I think our level of knowledge, our experiences as humans influence and shape our perception of the film too.
That's
You know,
true.
I saw it when I was younger. I was drawn in by the visuals, and even when I saw it in college, it didn't hit me over the head like a ball peen hammer. But there was something enough in the film for me to want to watch it again, and that to me is the mark of a really good film. One other thing that I would add is that Rutger Hauer actually wrote that last bit of monologue,
Mm.
and he presented it to Ridley Scott, I think, on the day that they were going to shoot, and Ridley went with it. And I think it's poetic, it's beautiful, and it really sums up the film.
I think the nice part, and we'll get to this when we get to 2049, but to have Hampton Fancher, be there for this one and come back for 2017 to make 2049, it's helpful in terms of some unity. And I know the second screenplay credit given here is David Peoples, who went on to do Unforgiven and 12 Monkeys, and he, obviously he's done well where he feels like more of a polished artist than something like Fancher, who really dug in. So
That's why they brought him in.
yeah, and we've seen that credited and uncredited in many Hollywood places. So
yeah.
Now, for you, I don't know how much of a ranking kind of guy you are, but where does this sit in your Ridley Scott list?
I'm not a ranking guy, but I will tell you I bought the movie poster and it's hanging up on my wall. So
There we go.
I would say that it ranks highly.
All right, not bad. We know it's Will's number one Ridley Scott for sure. It sounds like it's your number one Ridley Scott. I'm that guy who, I admit, Black Hawk Down is the more I circle around that, the more I go, gosh, that's really something. I know it doesn't go to a heady place that this one does, and it doesn't revitalize genres the way, but it might just in terms of construction is its best, but not bad. So while Will figures out how to kind of return here for a second, I'll kind of get us to the closing and all that. But Ben, I want to say on behalf of Will, thank you so much for having us.
Hey, I'm back.
Hey, I was just about to thank Ben for his time. So closing thoughts for you, Mr. Johnson.
Real quick, I was just going to say another book. Before there was the internet, we had a book by Paul M. Salmon called Future Noir, The Making of Blade Runner. And if you ever want to know every single thing, like I'm talking about like what the crewman ate for lunch every day, kind of detail, that book is phenomenal. So check that out.
I will.
467 pages. God damn. All right. I'll see what I can do. Ooh, that's a lot of reading. Sounds good though. All right. So Will, well, first things first, Ben, once again, thank you. It's been so nice to, open this up to a tiebreaker and a guest, and I'll pass it to Will for either outros or say, drop the pitches and the plugs, whatever you need here.
Yeah, let's do some plugs first, Ben. Just in case everyone hated me and Don and loves you, which makes sense, and they don't listen to the next episode, why don't you drop some of your links and where we can find you, your Twitters, your Instagrams, all that fun stuff.
So I'm on Facebook. I know I'm on Twitter. I closed Facebook because I didn't want to be interrupted while we were doing this, but you can find me on Facebook under Ben Cahlamer. And on Twitter, I believe you can find me under B Cahlamer. Cahlamer, just in case anyone wants to put a hit out on me because I wore my replicant suit to this podcast.
And you like the special editions because you're weird.
Of course.
Of Star Wars. Yes, you. I know that, like Don, you're not a huge Twitter person yet. So we're gonna work.
There's no yet with me. I will keep fading from Twitter as the years goes on. I post my work and I call it a day. No cesspool for me.
But film Twitter is such a nice, accepting place.
I'll pass things. Enough. All right. Will, read us some outro and we'll get to the next spot.
Sure. Speaking of Twitter, follow us on Twitter at Cinephile Fits. And if you just heard what Don just said, you know that it's me on the account and not Don. Also, follow us on Facebook at Cinephile Hissy Fits Podcast. Also, find us both on Letterboxd. Ben, are you on Letterboxd as well?
I am.
Okay, what's your name on there?
I believe it's Ben Cahlamer, but I will get it for when we outro. Oh God. From when we outro 2049.
All right. Maybe, just maybe, we will be posting a poll matching this episode's for you listeners to weigh in on who you think made the most compelling argument to win this Cinephile Hissy Fit, even though I think all three of us were lovers. Thank you so much for your captive audience and social media participation. Cinephile Hissy Fits is a 25YL media podcast brought to you by ruminationsradionetwork.com. Please visit, rate, review, and subscribe. If you enjoyed this show, we have more Where That Came From with interesting hosts and more wonderful guests, including next week when Ben returns. All available on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere you find your favorite shows.
Gentlemen, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You know what they all say. Fantasy football is like a box of chocolates. And I know you. You love fantasy football. And you love chocolates. Well, 25 Yards Later is a fantasy football podcast with top-notch analysis, earworm music, and plenty of laughs. Each week we dive deep into 4 games, putting every fantasy relevant and occasionally fantasy irrelevant player under a microscope. Block out all the haters with 25 Yards Later, available wherever you get your podcasts, but maybe not where you get your chocolates.